And with that, I think we'd like to get started, and I'm going to turn this over to Kathy Cahill, who is the Assistant Dean or the Associate Dean of Accessibility and User Experience.
Morning, everyone. Really glad you're here to learn more about PDF accessibility. So just to give you some context, our team is Disability and Access Services in the Division of Student Life. And part of our team does more technology related work, and part of our team does student accommodation work with enrolled students and helping them with engaging with MIT and with their classes. So we serve students, faculty, and staff on the technology side. And the services we offer, some of our team members are here. Catherine, who introduced the program, and Rich Calagero, one of our accessibility consultants, are here. They do accessibility consulting on any MIT website or web application. Kate Quinn and Jennifer D work with any students who have alternative course material needs. So if a student can't read traditional print, they work with the professor and with the student to identify the best ways to get students their materials in a format that they can use. Kate and Jen and I also work in assistive technology. So if anyone needs some kind of alternative computer access or digital access, we are happy to talk to people about that. And then Chris LaRoche of our team and Catherine also work on user experience consulting, also known as usability, around trying to make any website or application more usable and user-friendly to the community. So we just wanted to give you a sense of what it is that we do. Our services are free across the MIT community. And there's, at the end of the presentation, there will be information about our site and how to contact us.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. So before we get started, I want to, as I said, we want this to be a monthly event, and we really want to know what you're interested in. So today we're going to talk about PDF accessibility, but we want this to be interactive. We want to know what your questions are. So as we go through the material, if you have questions, we'll ask that you keep yourself muted, but please put the questions in chat. Chris LaRoche is going to be monitoring the chat, and we'll stop at various times to take questions and answer them. We're also going to put up a poll that we have about future topics for these open office hours. And I'm going to leave that, I'm going to try to leave that open for everyone. Can you, it's blocking my screen. Is it blocking anyone else's screen?
You can minimize it, it looks like on mine. And then if I want it back up, I can just hit the polling button at the bottom of my window.
Okay, all right, but I'm gonna, oh, okay, I'm gonna minimize that. There we go. Thank you, Jen. We wish that we could do this in person. We're doing it via Zoom for now, but hopefully we'll be able to do this in person sooner rather than later. So let's talk about PDFs. PDFs and accessibility are a big topic. What we're going to do today is I'm going to give an overview of some best practices in making PDFs more accessible. I'm going to talk a little bit about what PDFs are and why we use them. And then Kate Quinn and Jen D from our office are going to give some examples and show some tools. Please answer your questions. We're going to post some links about where you can find tools and things like that. All right. So PDFs, why do we use PDFs? Many of you, I'm sure, ask that question. We ask it in our office all the time. PDFs are very, very frustrating. But they really did solve a problem initially. PDF stands for Portable Document Format. And it was an easy way many years ago to have documents be in a uniform format. It was also a way that we could take things that weren't digital and make them digital. The only problem is we were leaving a bunch of people out who couldn't see the images we made to make those PDFs. But it was a great thing. Everybody was using different word processing software, and we couldn't read each other's documents. And this was a way to put things together in one format that everyone could read. Adobe Acrobat Reader is the software that we typically use at MIT to read PDFs. It's free. We're going to talk about Adobe, although there are other softwares out there that create and read PDFs. There are different ways that you can make PDFs. You can create a PDF by scanning a document, and you could scan a physical document. We're going to talk a lot more about that soon. That is typically what we see when people take course materials, like they want to use a book chapter in a class. They will scan that and make a PDF from it. We also see a lot of people creating PDFs from software like Word, PowerPoint, different Microsoft Office software. We convert those documents to PDFs. We typically see PDFs used in things like email attachments. Maybe you've made a flyer that you want to send out to everybody in your department, and you make a PDF flyer and you attach it to an email and send it out. We see a lot of PDFs in course materials. As I said, Kate and Jen are going to talk a little bit more about that. They are things like, handouts, book chapters, just little pieces of information that you want to add to your class. And we also see a lot of PDFs as documents posted on websites. We were just talking about this yesterday. We saw a PDF that was quite long, and we thought, well, ideally we'll convert that to HTML. It was quite a long PDF, and it wasn't going to work as an HTML document, and it was a good use case for an accessible PDF. So now we're going to make that PDF accessible. But why are PDFs a problem? What makes them inaccessible? And the problem with some PDFs is they can't be machine read by an assistive technology like a screen reader, or other text-to-speech software like Kurzweil, I think, is one that we use on campus quite often. This affects a lot of users who have visual disabilities or reading-related disabilities because the text needs to be machine readable. And for something like Kurzweil, what users are doing is they're listening to the audio and they're also seeing the words being highlighted. So it's important that that can happen and that the software can take advantage of that. The three main types of PDFs that we see are scanned documents and documents created in another format like Word or PowerPoint and converted to PDF. We also see a lot of PDF forms that are created in another software and converted to PDF. That is really a topic on its own. I know we have some participants today who have struggled a lot with making their PDF forms accessible. And we feel like that's a pretty detailed topic for another day. So we're not going to touch on that today. But maybe if there's interest, we could do a session just on PDF forms. So how do we make PDFs accessible? It's a lot like other digital information when we talk about making PDFs accessible. Our sort of top 10 tips really apply to PDFs. But the one thing that's different is that you want to make sure that your PDF is not an image. Often when we scan a PDF, we scan a document and make a PDF out of it, it's just a picture of a document, and that is not accessible. So the number one thing you want to make sure is that your PDF is not an image. And Kate and Jen are going to talk about some ways that you can tell if your PDF is an image. And then we get into the sort of typical tips for digital accessibility that we're always talking about. We want to see a document that has good structure. In PDF lingo, that means that the document is tagged, so that someone who's using an assistive technology can get a sense of what the structure of that document is and what information is there and how it's chunked up into subsets. You want to make sure that there's a logical order to the document, so that it flows from one topic to another nicely so that someone could follow it. You want to talk about color contrast. You want to make sure that there's good color contrast in the document so that it meets the guidelines, and someone who might have a visual disability can see the information on the screen. You want to make sure that the text is readable, that there are no sort of fancy fonts or things like that in your PDF, that you're using, that the text is large enough to be read, that it's clear. With scanned PDFs, we often see some text that is very faint or maybe has been circled and underlined and highlighted so much that it can't be read. We also want to make sure if there are images in the PDF that there is alternative text there so that the reader can get a sense of what those images are. And we want to make sure that there's clear language in the PDF. You'll hear us talk about using clear language for headings, for links, and things like that. So all of the major accessibility tips that we are constantly talking about apply to PDF documents. There are a number of resources and tools that are available to you on the MIT campus to make your PDFs more accessible. Some help you in converting an image to an image PDF to a readable file that can be machine read. And some software will help you check for accessibility issues and correct them. So one of the tools that we have available is something called Census Access. And I believe Chris is going to put up in the chat the links for Census Access, and all of these things actually, so you can go right to them. Census Access is a software that's available to convert documents from inaccessible PDFs to accessible PDFs. And Kate is going to talk more about that in just a minute. Adobe Acrobat Professional has an accessibility checker included in it. And that software is available through IS&T through their software page. And you need to go there and figure the process is laid out there for getting Adobe Acrobat Professional. Microsoft Office also has a number of accessibility tools built into it so that you can check your document when it's in Microsoft Office or PowerPoint and make sure that it's as accessible as it can be in that format so that when you convert it to PDF, all of that will carry over. If you're interested in learning more about creating accessible PDFs, there's a very good tutorial on LinkedIn Learning. And everyone at MIT has access to LinkedIn Learning. It used to be lynda.com. This class is called Creating Accessible PDFs. And it's about 4 hours long. It's quite detailed, but it's very good. And I have to thank our friends in Human Resources for telling us about this class, because it's quite good, especially if you're interested in doing forms. Our contact information is here. We're available via email at accessibility@mit.edu. And there are a number of resources on our website. studentlife.mit.edu/DAS. So you can go there, you can find tools, resources, videos, and if you have questions, feel free to reach out to us at accessibility@mit.edu. So now I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Kate Quinn, who's going to talk about accessible course materials and scanned PDFs.
Thank you, Catherine. Good morning, everybody. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, give me a shout if you have any difficulty seeing this. So as Catherine said, I'm going to talk a little bit about scanned course materials. And here I am using Adobe Acrobat Pro DC, which, as Catherine said, is available to you through the ISNT software grid. If you are distributing course materials on a course site or by email, you need to keep in mind that there will be some users who are going to be interacting with it using their assistive technology. And like Catherine said, that could be a screen reader or a text-to-speech program, and both of which require that the text of the document be read aloud to them. And in order to do that, the PDF has to be in text format rather than an image. People could be using such technology for various reasons. It might be because of a learning disability, it could be blindness or a visual impairment, or it could simply be that they are an auditory learner and they take in information better when they're hearing it read aloud. So it's important that we include all those folks in when we are distributing materials. So one question is, how do we know if a PDF is an image or a text? Just by looking at this, it looks like text to me, but if I try to read it out loud, this is what happens.
Warning, empty page.
So as you can see, Adobe does not recognize any text in this document. And that read aloud feature can be found under the View menu. And I can use that feature in both Adobe Acrobat and Adobe Reader. Another way to tell if this is text or image is simply by trying to select the text as if I were going to copy and paste it. And if I try to do that in this document, there's no text here for me to grab. So there are two quick ways for you to tell if the PDF is text or image based. So whether you are using a scanner or a phone app, the computer won't automatically know that there is text. So you have to be the intermediary to make it accessible. So what can be done now that we've determined that this is an image? We have to convert this to text, and we can do that using the accessibility checker in Adobe Acrobat Pro. It's one of the tools that is in Pro, but not Adobe Reader. So you will have to have Acrobat Pro to access that. And once processed, then this should be readable text. And as Catherine mentioned, MIT also has a site license for Census Access. I'm going to switch to my browser to just show you what that looks like. So Census Access lives on the DAS website under Assistive Technology, and it's a self-service form. All you have to do is upload the file that you'd like converted and select which type of file format you'd like it converted to. So maybe that's an accessible PDF, maybe it's a Word document or an EPUB. And then once you submit it, Census Access will take care of the conversion for you, and it will send you the file back as an email attachment. And they are relatively quick. So that's available to you anytime to turn your documents into text. So I'm gonna switch back to Acrobat here. And I've submitted this document, and I'm just gonna show you what it looks like now that it's been converted. So let me have this read aloud.
The bard in flight. It occurred to me in a flight from London to Barcelona that Shakespeare could have written this blessed plot, this earth, this realm, this England with more.
So this is a success. I'm now able to have this PDF read aloud to me. Okay, so I'm going to give just one more example of a PDF. So this is one in which the conversion to text was not successful. So if you can see this image, it's clearly not the cleanest of PDF. The contrast is really poor. There's some underlined text here, and there's some notes in the margin, and all of that is going to affect the conversion to text. So even though the text has been recognized here, let me show you what happens when we have it read.
62-73 He photoxt addresses the practice of friendship as a st lowing ttp. 1c entry relaxiatin to the large question of how to leave.
So clearly not all of the text is readable for the screen reader here. And if I'm an auditory learner, or if I can't see this page, what I'm getting back in audio really is not going to be helpful for me in accessing this document. So unfortunately, in cases like this, really the only solution is to rescan this from a cleaner source file before having it converted to text. So I'm gonna pause there and give you all a chance to ask some questions before we move on to the next segment.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kate. If anyone has any questions about this or what we've discussed so far, please just unmute and then just ask the question directly. Okay, Kate, while people are thinking, I have a question. Is there a size limit on what Census Access can take, like a 5, 10, 20, 100-page document?
Good question. If there is a size limit, I have not encountered it.
Okay.
As far as I've seen, the only difference between a small file versus a large one is the time that it takes to return it.
Okay.
So this poem that I used as an example, that came back to me within a couple of minutes. I've definitely had larger multi-page PDFs take some time, but never usually more than a day or two to come back. So
Okay.
I have not brushed up against that limit, but I bet we can find out on the Census Access website.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi.
Does anyone else have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. This is Amy. Quick question about Census. Does it work to convert PowerPoints to readable PDFs?
It does. Yes, it'll work with PowerPoint.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, I was wondering how well this worked for, like, just because of the nature of my field, I do a lot of stuff with like symbolic math, and I was wondering how well any of this stuff works for converting, you know, integral signs or things like that.
Yeah, unfortunately, math is a different beast altogether. So Census Access at the moment does not have the capability of converting sophisticated math. There are other programs that you can use, and we can send you some resources if you'd like. We have typically outsourced to a country, or excuse me, a company called, is it Central Access, Kathy? I'm blanking on the
Yes.
name. Yeah, Central
Yeah,
Access.
Central Access. They're part of Central Washington University, and they do some conversions into accessible math, mostly Word-based documents with math type.
I'll find the link for that and drop it in the chat for you.
And thank you. Sharon just said it was, the limit seemed to be 64 megs for a PDF using Census Access. So that's pretty large.
Is that it for questions?
I have a question, actually. The census service, that doesn't handle also the tagging, right? It just converts illegible to legible. Am I right on that?
That is correct. It's not going to fully tag your PDF. It is only converting the text.
Oh, all right, so we're not done when we get that back. Okay.
No.
Thank you.
Hey, would the next step be to go through with something like the Adobe Acrobat Checker and look at the tags?
Yeah, absolutely. If the document that you're working with isn't just text, if there are images as well that need to be tagged, I would definitely recommend running the Adobe Accessibility Checker to see what else might need remediation at that point. But whether you're using Adobe or Census Access, it's always recommended that you will check manually. Even the most sophisticated conversion tools will make mistakes. So if you want to be really thorough, definitely check and do any manual edits that you might need.
Okay. So next, I think this is great. I think we all learned a lot about Census Access and how it works. Kate, is it being widely used at MIT? Are you seeing people use Census Access?
It is being widely used. We've had it, I want to say maybe 1.5 years or 2 years at this point, and we've pretty steadily seen an uptick in use.
Okay, great. So now Jennifer D is going to take over, and she is going to talk to us about converting documents from Word to accessible PDF and the process that you might go through for that. So Jen, do you want to share your screen?
Absolutely. So I'm going to share an example of a document that I made for our office. And it's a pretty simple document. So just have 2 pages here. And I started in Word. And I wanted to make sure that this would be accessible to anybody using a screen reader. So one of the first steps I do when going about that is make sure that I have my headings properly styled. So this is my title of my document, Adjusting to Remote Learning at MIT. And I went through and I styled that as heading 1. Now in a document, you're only ever going to have one heading 1, and it should be where you're starting. As you can see, that just changed my style there because I had adjusted it to, you can tell your style to look a new way. So if I have changed it to a certain font, then I right click on the heading 1 and tell it to make heading 1 match my new selection. Now, because this is a pretty simple document, under my heading 1, I only have nested to heading level 2, which means I only have basically 2 levels of information that I'm giving you. I'm giving you the broad overview and then 1 level of like chunked text under that. So here is my heading 2s. If I were going many levels deeper in this document, I may have labeled a heading 3, and you always want them to be what we call nested properly. So you're never going to go straight from a heading 1 to a heading 3. It would go nested from 1 to 2 to 3, if that makes sense. Now, as you'll see here, my links that are blue here are also descriptive links, where I'm telling you where this link is taking you. So right here, there's a link for Zoom, so you know it's going to take you to Zoom. That's preferable over saying, you know, click here for more information and having the linked text be here, because that way somebody who is just skimming through the links doesn't know where they're going to be winding up. Now there is one image on this page, and it is the MIT DSL logo in my footer. So for this, I did include alternative text because again, it is an image file. So with an image, you want to decide if it's decorative or if it's informational. This one is giving us a piece of information. It's telling us that this document is from the MIT Division of Student Life. And because it is giving us information, we are going to write some alternative text for that. So when I selected the image in this version of Word, which is for Mac, the toolbar up here changed and I could select alt text. You can also right click an image and select alt text from the dropdown. And then this side area opens up and I could write in here MIT Division of Student Life. Now, if you see below there, there's also a box where I could have marked it as decorative if this image had no real meaning to our document. So that's about all I wanted to show you in Word. So from there, I can pop over to Acrobat Pro. And again, it's just the version, the Pro version of Acrobat that allows you to do the accessibility checker. And it's not one of the tools that's so easy to find. So we're going to talk a little bit about first how to find the accessibility features here. So when you're in Acrobat Pro, you're going to go to your tools and you have to scroll down a bit. I may have scrolled past it there. And here's accessibility. So it's this purple symbol with a little figure in a circle, and you're gonna first have to add that. So I've already added it, but you'd select this drop down and select add. Now if I go back to my document, accessibility is now part of my toolbar on my side. And today I'm gonna focus on the accessibility check feature, but as you can see, there's other accessibility features here. So, oh, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna go back a step to Word to show you how I got from my Word document to Acrobat. Um, sorry about that. So in order to bring this document into Acrobat, and I hope you can see my toolbar as I progress in this, but I go File, Save As, and I'm going to select this drop-down menu where it says Export Formats PDF. Now again, it may look a little different on a version that you're using, but you do want to go through this process of exporting it from Word to a PDF. So that's how we got from one to the other. That allows us to keep all that work we did of tagging the heading styles and adding that alt text. So now when we do our accessibility check, hopefully a lot of that stuff is done for us. And it's much easier to do it in Word than to do it once you are in Adobe, which is why we like to do it that way. So I'm going to run my accessibility check, and I'm just going to leave it all as, you know, the automatic what it would check, and say start checking. And it pops up over on my left side here, and you're just going to use that caret to look at the details here. So I can see, you know, it passed that it's not an image only PDF. It passed that it is tagged. The logical reading order, it wants you to manually check. So is it going to read this in the correct order? The color contrast, again, it wants you to manually check, is there enough contrast between your foreground and your background? And then title failed. So we're gonna fix this. And so if you just right click this, you can fix. And so typically what that button would have checked is leave as is. I'm gonna uncheck that so I can type in adjusting to remote learning at MIT. And the document kind of remembered that because I have already fixed this, but if this was my first time going through that, that would have been empty. And I can click OK, and now my title has switched to passed. So I think I'll pause there and see if there are any questions.
And again, if anyone has any questions, please just unmute yourself and ask away.
I have a question. Why did that title fail?
Basically, it's a difference in how Word likes to do things and how Adobe likes to do things. So in Word, I selected heading 1 for the style. And that's just kind of what I've been taught as best practices for that format. But in Adobe, that heading 1 doesn't automatically also get recognized as the title. Catherine, do you have anything to add to that? That's my understanding of it.
Yeah, I often see that as a problem. And I think what you were seeing on the screen where it looked like the title was there because it said leave as is, I think that was just an artifact from us playing with it and taking the title out and putting the title back in. It wasn't really there. I've never seen that filled in and fail.
Okay. And the reason you have to use the heading is just so that it knows. Like you just type bold, it doesn't read it.
Right, exactly. So as sighted people, we can see, you know, bolded or larger text and be able to skim the document that way. But unless it's marked as a heading, somebody who's using a screen reader can't skim the document and find the section that they're looking for.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Thanks for your question.
Anyone else?
Yeah,
Hi.
so sorry.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead, Darcy.
Yeah, this is Darcy. I just had a question. So when the parts you're supposed to check manually, what are you doing there? Just like, how do you know when you manually checked it and it's okay?
So for color contrast, for example, there are tools that organizations have put out like WebAIM color contrast checker, where you basically select the color that's being used. You get like the hex for the color, and you can enter the color that you're using for your background and your foreground into that program, and it will tell you if it passes contrast. So basically that just means going out to a different platform, unless you already have a style guide, which is obviously my preference, is having a style guide where I know which color combinations are going to pass. But yeah, that's kind of why we didn't show that, because it would take us to yet another tool and we didn't want to overwhelm you guys. And then the reading order, you can open up another tool in the Adobe Acrobat Checker to look at the reading order, or you can just listen through to the text if it's not too long of a file, make sure it's reading it correctly.
What if it's not reading it correctly?
Then you do have to adjust that. So I can go back to sharing my screen, although I haven't done this particular adjustment in a while. So Catherine, feel free to add in, but I'll share this again. So you can see in the accessibility tools, so I was using the accessibility check, but there's also one for reading order. And so you can kind of rearrange things if you need to.
Yeah, if you sort of move the reading order panel out of the way, you can see it's basically reading this as one long piece. Often you'll see PDFs that have 1 through 45 listed for different pieces, and you can see what order they're going in. We see that a lot with longer documents that have columns or tables, things like that. And then this reading order panel allows you to kind of adjust that reading order and the order that they would flow in. Does that make sense?
Sure.
It's one of the more complicated things to do in PDF. And this is where I would really recommend that LinkedIn Learning class, because they can go through, he goes through the details of moving the reading order pieces around in a fairly long document.
And reading it as one big document just in order is bad?
Not necessarily. For this particular document, it's fine because it's 2 pages and it's going to read it in one order. So that's fine. It would be more of a problem if you had a document that had, as I said, columns to it, or pieces of information in a table, and you wanted to be very careful about what order that was read in.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Okay.
We have a question from Sharon. Sharon, go ahead.
Yes, so this is Sharon Lane. I work at MIT OpenCourseware. We've been doing a lot of PDFs over the years, and I do have a question. And first of all, I tried the census with one of my problematic PDFs, and it actually doesn't take the file. I tried both the PowerPoint format and the PDF. I don't know, like, I understand it's a third-party service. Is there like a troubleshoot, contact that, I can follow up with?
Sharon, there is. We can.
That's my first question. Yeah.
Forward that information to you and follow up after the talk.
Thank you. And my second question is that I was curious that I've been dealing a lot with lecture slides with a lot of images. And when I was listening to Jennifer's presentation, I was curious that, I often find the PDFs taggable and inaccessible, no matter what kind of tools I use in Acrobat. And I wonder, does that make a difference that I start to make it accessible in its original format, like the source file? If I have the PowerPoint slides, should I start from there and convert it into PDF will make the PDF more accessible? Because sometimes some PDFs just eventually we have to tag it like it's just an inaccessible file. I just don't know whether there's a better alternative way to make it work. That's my question. Thank you.
Jen, did you have thoughts about that, or?
I mean, like you mentioned,
I think if you have the source file, then that's probably the place to start. If the source language that you're using or source software that you're using, like PowerPoint, has accessibility, the ability to make accessible files, then that's probably the place to start, because I think you'll get a better conversion to PDF from the actual source, rather than having to do it in Acrobat. From what I understand, the Acrobat UI is not easy to use, and it's not always straightforward.
Yeah, exactly. It's more difficult typically to fix these things in Acrobat than to make it accessible in the source file.
And even if you don't have everything mitigated, it is going to be a lot less work to have that stuff done in the source file over and over again too.
So I also had a thought, is that if people have longish documents and they send them directly to Census Access, then it will do any OCR, it converts scanned images into text, but it won't tag anything for you. So my suggestion, I don't know, I was thinking, might it be easier, instead of having Census Access convert to a PDF, have it convert to Word, and then do your tagging or your accessibility fixes in Word and then convert to PDF, rather than having Census Access convert directly to PDF and then you're having to do all that stuff in Acrobat. Does that make sense?
Yep, and I saw that in the chat room you shared that URL that it's a support from Microsoft about how to make the Word documents accessible. Do they have similar embed tool with PowerPoint that they can make the slides accessible? They do. Okay.
They do.
Microsoft has they've really upped their game. Their site, they have for all of their tools, for all of their software tools, they do have that. So yeah, I don't have the exact URL here, but they would for PowerPoint and Excel and other things as well.
It is an option. It is a tool in Microsoft PowerPoint. Depending on the version that you have, the newer versions have the accessibility feature. Jen showed it for Microsoft Word. There is a similar feature for PowerPoint, I believe.
Thank you. I'll explore that. Thank you.
I have a question about Word templates. So often we're setting up pretty simple Word templates for our staff to use. Are there any specific considerations we should follow, even though it's really just the scaffold of the document that would help with accessibility down the road when we go to convert it?
I would keep in mind that the headings be nested properly within your scaffold. And if there's any color used, I would do the color contrast check up front. What do other people think?
Thank you.
Yeah, I think templates can be a huge help in making the documents more accessible because, as Jen said, you can get the color contrast sort of solved and you can have a good heading structure that you want to use. So I think that a template that's rock solid would be a good start.
Does anyone else have a question?
Okay.
I think that is it.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. This has been great. You had really great questions. And I'm just looking at our poll to see the topics that came up. And it looks like a lot of people are interested in accessible digital forms and accessible PowerPoint presentations. So, so we'll take all this information. I'm going to end the poll now, and we'll take this information, and hopefully we'll have an announcement soon about some open office hours in July, where we'll talk about another accessibility topic and take your questions. So I hope this has been helpful for you. And we will, as I said, we've recorded this and we will be posting it online on our site, hopefully by next week. So if anybody has any final thoughts, now's the time.
I guess I want to add, if you have a specific question that you feel like didn't get answered here, we are always available through email or just a private Zoom meeting with you to discuss something specifically of interest to you more in depth.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a good point.
I actually have just a quick last question tagging on something Rebecca just put in the chat. Hi, this is Stephanie. She mentioned that you often go from a design file to a PDF rather from Word or something like that. And I know I've been working with an InDesign file, and I just started poking around since since it's part of the Adobe suite. I don't know if you guys have anything to add about sort of using accessibility checks within those different design tools like InDesign or Illustrator, and whether they kind of work similarly to what we've just gone through. Does anyone have any experience with that?
Yes. And it's not easy is basically all I can say about it. It's a kind of very effortful process, but I'd be happy to look at something specifically with you guys and try and troubleshoot things that come up.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I also wanted to say that the folks, I believe there's another office that has done some extensive work with Adobe design files, converting them into accessible PDFs. And so I think we could talk to you about that and maybe connect you with folks that have done that already.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you, everyone. And if you have other questions, please email us. But in any case, we will see you in July for our next session.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Everyone.
you.
Thank you so much.